thanks to all of you from all over the country and the world joining us for this time together. And hopefully we will be able to learn. And I think a lot of what you have highlighted as some of the reasons that you're here are things that we are going to be addressing directly. One of the things that will be quite interesting, I've got a bit of a surprise for you. I have spent over 30 years developing a gift for you, and I'm going to give it to you at the end of the session. And it's something that could help you enormously in some of the things that you've highlighted, as well as a whole lot of other areas of life. It's a tool that will give you insights into yourself and your relationships that will be, I'm hoping, quite profound. Let's get into this, and I'm going to share my screen. Firstly, the fact that you're here because of the issue around workplace conflict is so important and so relevant. You can see, just on the basis of this study that was done this year, how destructive the tensions in teams can be. And I don't mean constructive tensions, because you're always going to have constructive tensions in teams, and you want to have constructive tensions in teams. It's those destructive conflicts that keep on getting the way, that reduce performance. Unresolved conflict reduces performance by 67%. Turnover rates resulting from conflicts at work, 51% increase because of those conflicts. 88% of employees trust their employers less due to unresolved issues. So if we can develop better skills at resolving conflict and difficult issues in teams, look at the opportunity we have to impact how people perform, how people get on, and of course it will eventually impact things like innovation and every aspect of performance. Let's move into values, which is where we're going to focus our attention. And here what's important is that when we talk about authenticity, a word that is used so much in leadership, and rightly so, because it's the foundation of all leadership, it's very difficult to lead people authentically when you're artificial yourself. So authenticity becomes vitally important. But when we talk about authenticity, we don't mean about you get what you see. That what you see is who I am, the kind of thing we often hear said. That's not authenticity, that's naturalness. And there's something to be said for naturalness, possibly, but that's not a value. That's not something inherently human. Animals are much better at this than we are, at just being themselves, at being natural, at making sure that you get what you see. Animals are superb at that. That's not a human quality. What is a human quality is the type of authenticity that is me at my very best, me as I could and should be, me as I am when I'm in alignment with my values, not when I'm simply revealing to you my raw instincts. And that means that we need to understand our values. If I'm going to be authentic, and authenticity means me when I'm aligned with my values, I'd better know how these values work. And there's nothing like seeing the authenticity of a real person. Replicas just don't have the same emotional power. It's that emotional power that a leader has. It's the energy that a leader is able to project. And I'm not even talking about charisma. Some leaders are quiet. Some leaders are introverts. Some leaders are not charismatic. It's not about charisma, but it is about an energy that comes from an inner place that is truly authentic. Because leaders of character, meaning they're aligned with their values, are the ones who are authentic. It's those leaders who are truly aligned that can courageously lead by their own greatness. And to understand this, we need to clarify certainly in our conversations with you, the difference between what I call a value, which we all have, and value drivers, which have a very specific meaning in terms of our conversation today. Values are the sum total of the things we believe as being good or bad and right and wrong, the things we teach our children. That's great. But value drivers is a much smaller list. It's a subset of the values. The value drivers are those values for which we have or would be willing to pay a price in order to stand by. when you believe in something, when you believe is something that something is right, and you've made a sacrifice for that, you've made a hard decision, you've made an inconvenient choice just because you believe it's right, that's a value driver. But to just have a belief in general of something, that isn't necessarily a value driver, but it might be a value. So we all have well over 100 values, and our values are not that dissimilar from one another. We all like fairness and integrity and truth and honesty and all those good things. But how many of those things have we actually been called upon to make a difficult decision for, to make a sacrifice? And we've actually done so. Those are the values that drive our lives. Those are the values that drive our decision making and the choices that we make. And those are those value drivers is really what determines our authenticity, who we are at our very best. But knowing our value drivers is not just a matter of having a list of value drivers and being able to record the list. Being authentic and knowing your value drivers also means knowing how they interact with each other, knowing how they interface with each other, know how your different value drivers work together as one holistic integrated system. And what we're going to talk about here is being able to understand your value drivers as an integrated system. The way we do this is with a simple model where we think of our value drivers not as a list of value drivers, as I mentioned, but rather think of them as ripples in a pond. You drop a little stone into a pond and it sets up some ripples. And think of your values as the system, a system that is set up by a core value driver being in place. And if that core value driver is firmly in place, it sets off a number of subsequent value drivers, which results in the outcome value driver that the people around you experience you as. That's how they see you. That's how they would say, that's how they might describe you. But those outcome value drivers are the result of a whole lot of waves that are generated from your core value driver, that which stands at the very core of who you are. So let's look at an example of that. Consider three people with the same values, same value drivers. Three people who believe kindness is critical, respect is critical, honesty is critical. And this is a real case. I'm just referring to three of their value drivers. They were a little more complex than that. I'm doing this for the purpose of simplifying. So the three people working together in one team happen to have three very similar value drivers. So you might think they get on pretty well together. You might think that there's certainly none of that kind of conflict that we've been talking about in the team, where the people in the team share the same values, but not so. And the reason that not so is not because of their value drivers, which are the same or very similar. The reason is because the system of their value drivers, the system that we call their specific leadership fingerprint. So Sue has honesty at her core. She can't start a relationship unless the honesty is sacrosanct. I know that you will be honest with me. I know that I can be honest with you. Because if I have that kind of a relationship with you, I can respect you. And if I respect you, I can afford to be kind. I feel safe. I don't feel the kindness will be exploited, and I don't believe it will get in the way of honesty. So I need to have honesty at the core. That generates respect, which results in kindness. So you might experience me as a very kind person, but the reason you experience that kindness is because I respect you. And the reason I respect you is because we have an honest relationship. Jenna's a little different. Jenna's got kindness at the core. She says, I can't really have a relationship with anybody if we don't have a kind interaction. If there's kindness in our relationship, I can be honest. If I know that there's not going to be abuse and cruelty if I say something rather directly, I can do that only if I know that there's kindness there. And once there's kindness and honesty in a relationship, I can generate respect. I can have respect for you. And in Jenna's case, you might experience her as being a very respectful person, but you experience her as respectful because you're honest with her. And you're honest with her, and she's honest with you because you've been able to establish a connection of kindness, not just one of brutal honesty. And then we have Jack, who says, I can't start without respect. I need to respect somebody before I'm kind to them. Yes, I can respect people generally, all human beings I respect, but I need to have a specific respect for you in order to stretch out to you, in order to put myself out for you, in order to care for you and serve you, be kind to you. And if we have respect and kindness in place, I can be honest. Now, consider for a moment what happens when these three get together, as they do on a team. And imagine right now that Sue, that's the middle set of value drivers, is having a performance conversation with Jenna on the right-hand side. So you can see immediately what's going to happen, right? Sue's going to start being very honest with Jenna and say, you know, Jenna, we have to have a conversation. I'm not happy with your performance. There are a few things you're not doing that you should be doing. There are a few things you should be doing that you shouldn't be doing. And this can't continue. I need you to make some changes. These are the changes I need. Jenna breaks out into tears. She's so unhappy. She's so sad. She feels it's so brutal. And Sue is then thinking to herself, I just can't have an honest conversation with this girl. The moment I have an honest conversation, she feels like a victim. She feels that I'm cruel to her, and the conversation breaks down. So I can't have respect for her. And their relationship really does break down. And so here you've got a manager and somebody reporting to the manager who can't establish that connection of trust, that connection of honesty and openness and respect that is so key to a team relationship. Not because they have different values. They have exactly the same values. They have the same value drivers. The difference is in the system. The difference is in the leadership fingerprint. What's at the core? What's at the outcome? What are the vehicle value drivers that are designed to be able to achieve that particular outcome? So let's just pause there, and we're going to ask you a quick question. If you can fill in the poll. How often do you consider personal values as a factor in your team's collaboration and decision making? So we've got some people who say frequently, it's core to how we work together. Some, about the same number of people, who say occasionally. And then there are a whole lot of people who say also about the same number of people, if you take them together, who say really or never. So let's look at what the opportunity is here to do things a little differently. I'm going to give you some real life examples of fingerprints that are a little bit more complex than the ones we've just looked at. And I'm going to look at it firstly from a perspective of teams, and then I'm going to look at it from a perspective of a personal relationship, because this applies equally to both of them. So let's have a look at Amy. Amy is self-motivated. She believes in hard work. Her motivation leads her to work hard. She is motivated to work hard. That's how her core translates into the vehicle value driver. Through her self-motivation, she works incredibly hard. That requires her to set goals, which she does. And it requires her to be fit, to be mentally fit, to be physically fit, because she sets stretch goals for herself. She wants to work hard. She's so motivated. And her fitness enables her to be adaptable and to be resilient, to overcome obstacles and difficulties. You can see what kind of driven person this Amy is. And that leads her to communicating effectively. And look at this, it's so interesting. Work-life balance is her outcome. She believes that if she gives expression to her self-motivation, to her drive, to her hard work, she believes that her fitness, adaptability, resilience, and effective communication will lead to work-life balance. She works for her work-life balance. She doesn't start with her work-life balance. For some people, work-life balance might be the core value driver. But in her case, that's not so. She realizes a lot of things have to be in place before she can lay a claim to work-life balance. Now, in her team is Garrett. Garrett believes in inner harmony at his core and artistic inspiration. So he's a creative person, compassionate communication, collaborative problem solving. Let's get together and figure this out. Environmental stewardship is really important to him, and so is cultural preservation. Can you see the possibility for conflict over here? Can you imagine how many times Amy and Garrett have experienced conflict? How often Amy has felt that Garrett is just not cutting it, that Garrett is not performing? How often has Garrett felt that Amy has lost her humanity and all she's interested in work? And yes, she talks about what work-life balance, but you don't see it in her day-to-day activities. And they start losing respect for each other and trust in one another. Now imagine they have a session, which the kind of session that we often host and facilitate with teams, where they reveal their leadership fingerprints. And Garrett gets to understand who Amy is. And Amy gets to understand who Jarrett is. And they understand what it is that irritates one another and triggers them. Because you see, when one of your three core value drivers is challenged, it triggers you into defensiveness, which manifests sometimes as anger, sometimes as withdrawal. There are different ways that we all express our defensiveness, but we become defensive when our core value drivers are challenged. So for Amy, at her core is self-motivation, hard work, goal setting. You can see for Garrett, that's not his core. He's looking for inner harmony. He might often be late for work because he was busy meditating or he was, watching the sunrise. Artistic inspiration. And he says, if I just take those few minutes, and yes, I'm a little late for work, but that enables me to be inspired and to be creative at work. Isn't that more important than just work, and goal setting? And Amy is triggered, and Amy gets defensive, and Amy gets short-tempered with Garrett. And Garrett just can't trust Amy, can't respect Amy, can't look up to Amy. But when you put the two fingerprints on the table and you say, this is Garrett, this is Amy, Garrett meet Amy, Amy meet Garrett, and understand that's who he is. We call it a fingerprint because you can't do anything about it. This is something that's developed throughout your life and probably started before you were born. And that's why we call it a fingerprint. It's in what I call your spiritual DNA. It's not something you can change. And it's not good or bad. It's just who you are. And to understand, how do I use Garrett? Instead of trying to force Garrett to be like me, how do I use a person with artistic inspiration on the team? How do I use a person who has this capacity for compassionate communication? This person who can build collaborative problem solving. How do we use this person on the team instead of just hammering him and getting more and more frustrated with him? And when we're able to introduce Amy and Garrett to one another on a deeper level than superficial, you can imagine what energy that liberates and what new trust and respect that's able to liberate. Let's look at it on a personal level. Cindy and Elliot are married to one another. They're partners in a relationship. So if we look at Cindy, honesty, kindness, integrity, what a lovely person, commitment, calm, order, respect, forgiveness, an easy person to be with. She's married to Elliot, who's about constant improvement, embrace and encourage challenge, streamline the process, be efficient, be reliable and accountable, and equitable treatment, treat everybody the way they deserve to be treated. And then you can foster collective success. Let's do things together. Can you imagine how many frustrating moments there are between these two, where Cindy feels that Elliot is lost his humanity, that he's just driven for outcome, that this encouragement of challenge undermines kindness and sometimes certainly calm, and she can't find the calm in the relationship, so she has to find the calm somewhere else, and she develops her own life outside of the home to find her calm and order and respect. She can't really have respect for somebody who doesn't understand anything about her values. And he gets very frustrated because she's inefficient. She doesn't use her time efficiently. He likes to streamline processes. And she's busy with the kindness and with the calm and with meditating. And he wants challenge. And he wants to be out there and he wants to be stretching boundaries. He wants reliability. She's not always reliable. Sometimes things take a little longer, and that's okay for her. She stays calm and stays with order. Whereas he wants accountability and he wants efficiency, very, very different. And when we introduce Elliot and Cindy to each other, and they've known each other for years, they knew each other for years before they were married, and they've been married for several years, but they had no idea that this is who they are from a character perspective, and that they can support each other and complement each other as long as they understand. as long as Elliot understands that when he's unkind to Cindy, it triggers her core. It triggers her to the soul. And she needs to understand that just as she is triggered when somebody is unkind or dishonest to her, Elliot is triggered when people are not constantly improving and challenging themselves, when people are not efficient and streamlined. That's when he feels undermined and when he feels threatened at his core and in a sense compromised at his core, and he becomes defensive. And the moment Elliot and Cindy understand each other, they get it. So when Cindy loses it, Elliot realizes he's obviously said something unkind or something which maybe Cindy didn't think was really fully honest. That wasn't his intention. He wasn't even aware of it. But the moment he now is able to notice in her expression, he can notice on her face the moment she's been triggered. And he knows what he's got to look at. He's got to look at her value drivers, not mine. I've got to look at your value drivers. If you've been triggered by something I've said, I've got to say, what have I done to trigger your value drivers? The fact that I'm not triggered by it, the fact that I don't feel it was unkind. I just thought I said a simple thing. So Elliot might have said to Cindy, you really don't look so great in that dress. Maybe you should change. Now, Cindy could be completely devastated, not because of the honesty, because she wants honesty, because of the unkindness. She might have experienced it as unkind. Or the opposite might happen. She might say, how do you think I look in this dress? And he might have said, you've put on a bit of weight in this particular dress. You don't look so great. And she might say, wow, that's honest of you. I really appreciate this. You're being kind to me. I'll change into a different dress and look better. I appreciate it, because honesty is her core. It opens so many channels of communication. It enables so much building of trust and respect when we just understand what makes the other person tick at the depths of their soul, at the depths of their character. This is not about superficial personality. This is not about the way you appear. This is about who you are at your core. And to know that for yourself so that you can be authentic to yourself and check your authenticity from time to time. And to know that about your partner or about your colleague at work or about the members of your team. What a power that is. What a superpower that is to be able to know that. And until very recently, for us to be able to give you the benefit of this type of mapping of your character, mapping of your value drivers, giving you a leadership fingerprint, took 4 or 5 one-on-one coaching sessions. There's a cost involved, there's a time investment, but that's how long it took to do that. It's not the kind of thing that you fill out a questionnaire and a computer spits out an answer. It's something you build yourself by going into your life, by looking back at your life story from birth until the present moment and understanding from your life what your fingerprint is, understanding from your life story who you really are at your soul level and who the person with you is at his or her soul level. And it used to take 4 or 5 coaching sessions. But what we've been able to do with an enormous amount of investment of effort and ingenuity on the part of our team is to teach AI what it's taken us 30 years to learn. And we've now developed a tool. These fingerprints that I've just shared with you, this fingerprint of Cindy and Elliot, of Amy and Garrett, these fingerprints were generated by our digital tool. It takes it 45 minutes to listen to you, to question you, to engage in a coaching relationship with you of surprising nuance and depth, asking you questions that you've never really thought about before, and requiring you to articulate some deep ideas about your life, and all of that in 45 minutes. And instead of a 5 coaching sessions, which is you can imagine what the cost can be for that, for about $50, an individual is able to get their leadership fingerprint mapped out to this degree of accuracy. If we look at those workplace conflict stats switched around into the positive, you see that resolving workplace conflict translates to a 3x improvement in performance. Just imagine that if you take your team and you do a leadership fingerprint with them, and then you do a value sharing session. We often facilitate those sharings, and sometimes the clients or companies do that themselves. Leaders of teams do that with themselves with the leadership fingerprints that they've generated. A 3x improvement in performance, a 2x reduction in employee turnover, and 88% of employees, 88% more employees trusting their employers more. What an opportunity it is to be able to build these connections, to be able to build these levels of respect and trust simply by really understanding the other person. Understanding the other person, not in terms of what they say superficially, not even in terms of some of the things they do, but understanding them at their core, at a soul level, about what it is that makes them make the choices they make, what it is that makes them get really upset and really defensive when their defenses have been triggered, and how to avoid doing so. And this tool that I've described to you, that in 45 minutes is able to work with you, because that's what it does. It works with you to design and produce your own unique leadership fingerprint, is a tool that we're giving away to you free of charge for the time that you've taken to spend with us here. We've given you a code so that you can use this either by photographing the QR code or by using the Achieve 24 code. You can find it on lappeninternational.com leadership fingerprint, or you can contact us and we can give you information on that. This is available for 1 week, so I would advise you to set aside 45 minutes at least, maybe an hour. Try not to rush it, because the quality of the output is going to be dependent on the quality of the input. The more effort that you're able to put into thinking about the questions, answering the questions, articulating the answers, thinking about the values that drive the value drivers that are being generated and their position in the system, and being sure that what is being given to you is something that resonates with you, that feels right to you. If it doesn't feel right to you, it needs some more work, or you need to get in touch with us. It's really important that once the instrument, the tool, has given you its output, you look at that and say, yes, that's who I am. That's me. And out of the many, many hundreds of people that have already tried this, it's a new instrument, but we've tried it already with thousands of people. And that is generally, and I would say more than 95% of cases, that's generally the response of people saying, wow, this is me, this is who I am. So I hope you'll enjoy using that, and we'd love to hear from you when you have used it, and hear what your comments are in any ways that you think we might be able to improve it, because it is a work in progress, but already it's something that I think can be of enormous value to you. So I'm going to pause there, and I'm going to invite you to submit questions either in the Q&A or in the chat. I'm going to ask Zach to read out the questions that he feels should be addressed, so that I can focus on that and not on the questions themselves.
Well, first off, David, thank you so much for introducing this framework. One, I agree with who put this in the chat, JD, about this approach and kind of perspective on values, and how there's almost different weights or things at the core over other values. I think that's a very new perspective on this concept, right? Where we've always learned, like, what are your 3 to 5 core values, and that's just what you run with. This is like a whole nother, I guess, a little bit of a shift on how we start to view these. And I'm curious, as one follow-up question I personally had, do you find that as we understand the fingerprint at an individual level, organizations should also try to mirror their own value strategy in a similar framework for themselves?
Yeah, a great question, Zach. We do that work with organizations too, but it's really the other way around. The organization can't model its values around its people. It has to model its values around its own history and background, and its own business strategy, and its own leadership team or founders if it's a newer company. But then it's for the individuals to look at what level of alignment there is between my fingerprint and the company's.
Mhm.
And very often we find, not very often, we sometimes find an individual will look at their own fingerprint and their companies and just say, I'm at the wrong place. I'm actually not working at the right company. And every time that happens, it works out better for the individual and better for the company. But usually people are attracted to places to work because there is an alignment. They maybe have not been able to articulate it, but in this exercise, they discover it. And then their commitment to the company becomes so much greater. Their comfort and loyalty to the company becomes greater. I see Pauline asked a great question. What if the core is sociopathic, like narcissism, or more mildly, the need to always be right? Pauline, one of the things that we haven't been able to do in terms of time in this particular discussion is to talk about the difference between the defensive and what I call the heroic operating system. The heroic operating system is a values-driven operating system, and some of the choices we make in life are driven by our values, and they are heroic. And then there's the defensive side. When we're afraid or we're scared or we're insecure, then we make decisions based on defensiveness. The values that you call such as sociopathic or the need to always be right, those are actually defensive responses of people who are insecure. So you'll never find that at the core of a value system. We have done tens of thousands of fingerprints. Firstly, we did them all manually. Now we still do them manually for those who want the process to be much richer and much deeper, and who have the time and the funds to be able to do that. But we're doing thousands in the digital form, and we haven't had one situation where the fingerprint is a negative, nasty fingerprint. We've looked at the values of criminals in prisons, and their actual values, their value drivers are good. They just don't live up to them. They don't actually keep them. They're constantly pulled down by this defensiveness that results from insecurity. Now, where the insecurity comes from and why it keeps pulling people down, that's another whole discussion, which sometimes is part of leadership development and sometimes there's a need for therapy. But the actual leadership fingerprint will always have, if the coaching is done well, if you've put in the effort with the digital fingerprint, the core will always be great. And the fingerprint will be a great human being. Just as when we introduced these two people to each other in the examples I gave you, they got to know one another. When you discover your own fingerprint, you will meet yourself and you will say, wow, I didn't realize what an exceptional human being I am. And that's the gift of doing your fingerprint.
Yeah, it seems like such a powerful like awareness awakening type experience for some of us, especially as the world's pretty tough out there, pretty challenging, pretty chaotic. It sometimes triggers us into those insecurities or those defensive behaviors, but it's not a representation of our values at the core. And that can sometimes, I'm assuming, like awaken this energy and centeredness of yourself, but then also it seems like an empathy tool as well, right? Where when you do this with your team or with others, it's also building empathy and awareness building of how other people are maybe structured from a value set.
Totally. It builds the whole dynamics of the team. It opens that capacity for empathy. It just liberates the defenses
Mhm.
and the barriers between people. It's magical to see what actually happens in a team. It's totally magical. I see some people have said they've had difficulty with the username. Sherlyn from our team has put up a note there. Sign up, sorry, difficulty with the code. Sherlyn says, sign up with your username, make a password, and then you'll see a button to enter the access code.
Yeah. So to reaffirm that, everyone, it sounds like sign up with your username, password, add the access code, and then you'll be able to go into that from there. So,
And Kirsty says again to people who are having a difficulty, if you scroll up, you'll see if you just look around there, you'll find where it asks you for that code.
a follow-up question for you, David. It came in the Q&A, and Kearsley asked this: is there something I could share with my peers for all of us to utilize before 11/26? So on one end, is this accessible for all of their peers to use, or just as a follow-up question in general for the individuals in this room, if they were saying, hey, you know what, we do want to bring this to our team, can you share what that experience would look like for them?
Yes, absolutely. This is available to the team. The code is only usable once, of course, but It's not an expensive tool to use for a team. So the team can go through it, and then you can contact us, and one of our experienced facilitators can facilitate an online sharing session where you actually create a very safe place for people to share their fingerprints and to have a conversation around how those fingerprints interact and how the conflicts arise and how to resolve the conflicts. So that's something that we do offer, or you can do it yourself and run the session yourself, either from the talent team in a corporation, or the team leader, him or herself, can do so.
Yeah. To even build off of that specific scenario, so let's say we do this session, and whether you're facilitating it or we're doing it ourselves internally as a team, how do you help ensure, or what do you recommend this to help ensure it sticks, right? And it truly gets integrated into our daily work or part of how we communicate and part of our culture, rather than it's being like, okay, this was a great team building session and that's it, right? So what do you recommend as that to make sure it sticks?
Zach, so there are two answers to that. The first thing is, there are certain things in your life that when you have seen them, you can't go back to unsee them. We know that's certainly the case in negative situations. A child can see something, an adult can see something horrific, and you can't unsee it. And it's the same with some beautiful things that you see that you don't unsee. When you meet yourself, when you see yourself, and when you see the people you work with, you can't kind of forget about that. That is who you are, and that's who they are, and it's embedded indelibly in your mind. However, it's very helpful to be deliberate about using it. So, for example, I keep my own fingerprint in my office and on my bookshelf staring at me, and I use it. I check in with myself. How's today been? How aligned and authentic have I been to those values? Are those still my value drivers? Is this still relevant and correct for me? Um, and to consider it. So if it's used all the time, so whenever there is a conflict in a team, to pull the value drivers out, to say, 1 second, let's take a step back. Let's replay this. Let's just understand where we're both coming from. You remember, these are my value drivers. Let's have a look at your value drivers, and let's try and understand what's just happened in terms of our fingerprints. So to have them documented, to have them present at your place of work, and to use them when difficult conversations have to be had or when conflict has arisen, that's one of the ways to make sure that it sticks. And for the leader of the team to reference it frequently.
Yeah.
It's very much like I guess any instrument. You can go to the gym and you can look at the equipment. It's not going to make you terribly fit.
Yeah.
You can do it once or twice, and you might get fitter, and then it goes away. It ceases to be effective. So it's an exercise. It's a practice. It's a life practice. But one thing is for sure: your awareness of yourself, your self-awareness, and your awareness that others too have a fingerprint, even if you don't know what their fingerprints are. Just for me to know the Zek I'm looking at now is not the Zek, is not Zek. The Zek I'm looking at now is actually some pixels on my screen. And if we were face to face, I would have a picture of you more physically, and I would have a sense of your energy better than on a screen. But once I've seen your fingerprint, my goodness, that's a different human being, and I begin to understand you. It's not different that you're nothing that I expected. It's just, wow, that depth, that's what it means. That's who you are. That's what your life is about. What a difference that makes to the way we interact.
Yeah, it reminds me of like a quote I've always held on to, especially with culture change or behavior change. It's like the first gate to change is awareness, right? And
Right.
once you pass through that gate, now you are ready to kind of step into the change, the evolution, and the next stage of growth or whatever that might be. And it's
Yes,
yeah, once you build awareness, you can't go back, right? So
yes,
uh
exactly.
that's often like just that initial gift that you can give your team or to each other is going to provide that immediate impact because yeah, like you said, once
Zach, isn't it really interesting, because people often talk about the importance of self-awareness and that that's one of the key leadership characteristics, which it is. But how often have you heard people tell you how to develop it?
yeah,
Um, you must be self-aware. You need greater self-awareness. But how do you do it? What does it
yeah.
mean? This is a tool that enables you to be aware of yourself in ways you could never have been before.
And to Kirsty, she kind of followed up like she's used these tools before, but it's really difficult for us to continue to remember what we've learned or to reaffirm these. And as you shared, it sounds like developing certain rituals or practices that help you revisit these things. And I even think about a potential situation where, hey, if we're going into a team meeting where there's going to be a debate or we know there's going to be conflict because we're trying to make a decision on what to do about this product release or whatever it is, um, that would be a great moment to like have a check-in. Let's revisit these before we jump into this discussion. Let's center ourselves on empathy and awareness, and then let's enter this conversation. So it's like maybe use it as like a check-in exercise or a connection exercise before you're getting into more
Exactly.
vulnerable conversations. I feel like that would be a good
Exactly.
use case, but I don't know.
Uh,
Do any other ones come to mind for you
uh,
as
uh, Absolutely. And every time you use it, it just becomes more embedded in your operating system, in the way you function, the way you operate. Even if you use it silently, if you've just had a difficult conversation with somebody, maybe isn't on your team. It could be a clerk in the bank. It doesn't matter with who. To revisit your value system, just say, hey, what happened there? Was I triggered? Did this person do something to trigger one of my core value drivers? How could I have responded differently and stayed true to my values? And what might that outcome have been? If did my partner trigger me when I lost it with my partner or my children or my parents? What was that about? Did they say something? Did they trigger one of my core value drivers? And how could I have come back instead of defensively? How could I have come back in a way that was aligned? I think this is a really important question from JD. What happens when someone's presumed values don't align with their behavior? I'm thinking of how LGBTQ folks experience hostility in the workplace, but the reasoning is that the religious spiritual is at conflict with acceptance and tolerance. And without going into it in great detail, because that's a huge question that you're raising there, JD. But the one of the points I think is that in this process of creating a fingerprint, what very often happens, we have situations where very religious people might put faith or belief in God at the core of their value driver. And tolerance and kindness and whatever might be much nearer the outer limits or might not be there at all. And then you know straight away, this is a person that it's really about that faith and hasn't developed the interpersonal skills, and that hasn't been core to who they are and what that means. And sometimes it'll be the other way around. Somebody will say kindness and connection and loyalty leads to faith. And so, for example, I've had a situation in the same team. One person had faith at the core and then connection and family, and one person had family and then faith. And when I questioned each of them, if your partner was unwilling to come along with your faith, would you get divorced? The one said yes, because faith is at my core. And the other said never, because family is at my core. Just two different ways of dealing with the same situation because I have a different fingerprint.
wow, that's very heavy too. I could feel the connection that you could start to build as you work through what seems like very emotional conversations potentially, but having awareness and structure to it can help you navigate these conflicts that sometimes may seem unsolvable, right? And how are we going to move forward on this? Carisha asked a excellent question in the Q&A, and this comes up all the time in our community about how we as individuals might see the value. We want our team or organization to embrace this practice. How do we begin that conversation? Like, how do I get decision makers, or how should I approach or get leaders to engage in this conversation or buy into this? Are there certain steps you recommend? And especially for the individuals here who are going to use this and they're going to have a great experience, they're going to want to get others involved. What are the steps or ways we can navigate that?
Zach, I'm sure you found this in your experience and the other people on the call as well. Um, the best way to engage fellowship is to share enthusiasm, not to try and compel. Um, just to say to somebody, you can't imagine what's just happened. Let me just tell you, I've had this difficulty with so-and-so on my team. I did this fingerprint and wow, do you know what's happened to the team? Do you know how this person, how our relationship has changed? Or I was going through a difficult time in my marriage and we did this thing. You can't imagine what that liberated. just to talk about your experience. If you go to somebody and you say, I went to this incredible restaurant, or I had this amazing vacation, you don't have to say, you have to go. I want you to go as well. You don't have to do that when you're selling. You just have to talk about your own experience. And of course, you're always free to give them as a gift a copy of Lead by Greatness, the book that I wrote. And that also puts the case. It doesn't talk that much about the digital fingerprint, which was in its very early phases of being developed at the time that I wrote it, but it certainly explains the idea of fingerprint and how important that is in relationships and in self-awareness.
Yeah. And maybe you just answered this question, but I want to maybe ask this in a different way. Um, Especially for us individuals who we might want to get our team engaged or others involved because they're part of the conflict, they're closed-minded or they're causing tensions. And um, this seems pretty productive for our group where we're very open and we're like, okay, let's build awareness and we're already engaged into growing into this stuff. But what about those individuals or teams where, they're participating in the conflict, but they're not as open-minded, or they're not willing to be vulnerable and engage in this type of thing? How would you handle that scenario?
So Zach, there certainly are cases where you can't break through, where it's just not the right time for an individual or for a team. They're just not that evolved to be able to do so, and sometimes one has to accept that. Um, Certainly, anybody is free to call us at any time. We've had so much experience in these things, and happy to give advice as to how to go about it, or to email us. And the other, as I say, is just by sharing experiences. And one of the ways that we've done it recently is just, would you be open to having a look at this? You don't have to share anything. Just try it out and let me know what you think of it afterwards.
Hmm.
And sometimes even, people always appreciate being asked for advice. Just saying to somebody, I'm interested in possibly doing this with our team. Would you try it out and tell me if you think it's a good idea?
Yeah.
Sometimes the people who are most cynical when they're asked for advice and given the opportunity come back as the most passionate supporters and zealots of
Yeah,
the
yeah. It's
things
kind
that
of
are
an
suitable
indirect
about them.
way. It's like an indirect way of like, hey, we're actually just looking for your expertise and
Yes.
perspective on this. But really you're indirectly building awareness for them, and it's
Yeah, because
kind of
nobody wants to, isn't
yeah.
there? Nobody wants to be told that we want to fix you. You're
Yeah,
broken and we
yeah.
want to fix you. But there are other ways to do it, of course.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, right? Like you don't want to make this seem like you need to do this because you're lacking something. It's more of how do we do this because you're the expert and we want to build on the impact
Right,
you're
exactly,
providing. Yeah.
exactly.
Um, Wonderful. Well, we got another question here. Kirsty, giving myself an opportunity to complete for free, sharing with my team. And the benefit is what I plan to do to get buy-in and purchase of the program. Oh, awesome, Kirsty. Yeah, this is great.
Great approach, because if you do that, I would be interested to hear how it goes for you.
What if there's never a good time? Tracy, I feel like that's always the thing, right? Like, we don't want to bombard our managers with another thing. It seems separate. Should they do it during core hours or should it be done outside of core hours? And yeah, like never is a good time for anything, right? Like we're already swamped. Any thoughts on that? Like that's a bit
But I,
objection.
I would challenge I would challenge that maxim that there's never a good time. I think there's never a perfect time, but there's
Mm,
often a good time, and you need to keep your eyes and ears open for the good time. A good time is not perfect. It's just a time that there might just be some openness. There's been a hitch. There's been a problem. There's a bit of hurt. There's been a bit of tension. Just look for the opportunity. Look for the crack in the armor to be able to suggest it. Not perfect timing, but it's just a time that there might be some vulnerability and willingness to look at it.
yeah. And I always find like if you can find a very specific use case that is timely and relevant, apply it towards that. But it obviously has added benefits way beyond it. But that's at least like like you said, your chink in the armor. That's your foot in the door to be able to do this. So, what is a use case? Is there a specific conflict? Is it a certain project that's being delayed? Is there a certain thing that's not progressing because of the team's effectiveness to collaborate? Maybe dial into that specifically.
That's great advice. Actually, look at a measurable challenge where there's a cost being paid, that we could rectify.
Yeah, accuracy, seeing the value and intent is what makes it a priority. So yeah, the intention, right? Like, is it a timely intention that can have an impact? All right, we're coming up on a minute here. We can keep the room open as well. If people are having issues with getting into the tool, we can answer some more questions there. There was a question in the Q&A as well, David, about is $50 the normal price if we would like to use the tool in the future? Is that the general pricing or packaging for this, or how can people maybe?
Yes, that is the general price. And as I say, that we do also offer the facilitation of a sharing session, whether online or in person, and that just depends on the situation. We can talk about that, but the actual tool is $50 a person.
Awesome. Amazing, everyone. Well, we'll hang out here if you have more questions on getting into the tool still. In the chat, you can claim your credits. Make sure to connect with David via LinkedIn. Follow Lappin on LinkedIn as well. I'm excited to take this assessment as well. Like, I'm really curious of what my fingerprint is, so I'll be jumping into that this week. Yeah, any closing thoughts, David, as we wrap up?
No, just been a real honor to spend this time with all of you. I know you're all very busy people, and appreciate your taking out the time. Appreciate your looking at it so seriously, and your excitement and your enthusiasm from what I've been able to pick up in the chat. And really look forward to hearing from you what your experience has been, and hopefully anything we can do together to enrich the experience and bring it to value to you and your team.
Yeah, 100%, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. It's an honor to learn alongside you. And as I think about the future of work as it becomes more tech enabled and AI enabled, I really feel that that human element is going to be the differentiator and the key, like, needle mover for ourselves and our organizations. And this gets us one more step to becoming more human connected and understanding and empathizing and having awareness with each other. So the very least, role model the way, do it for yourself, get a taste of it, and learn more about yourself. And that will trigger some interesting awareness activities for you to enhance your own life. So, thank you again, David, so much. This was amazing. That concludes our session for today, everyone. Hope to see you again in the future. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your afternoons.